It's really the moral quandary, right? Would you sell years of your life in exchange for cash? Who has the right to do it? That's a pretty timely topic, I would say.
Don't we already do that, though?
In a way, yeah, we do. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, right?
I mean, but even so, people who are farming, I don't know. Isn't that just kind of being human? Like, you can't really do what you want all the time. That's sort of the point of this film.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Except you don't sell those years all at once.
Well, I mean, you're giving up nights and weekends in exchange for getting it over with right away. Welcome to Don't Encourage Us, the show where we talk about the big ideas behind fiction projects of all different kinds. Books, movies, TV shows, video games, nothing's off limits. Today we're discussing Paradise, the 2023 German film presently on Netflix. But first, what's been on your list this week?
This week was pretty good. I watched a movie called Ballerina, Korean film. An action film. It's along the lines of Kill Bill, a revenge thriller. Really cool movie. I thought it was really well acted. The cinematography was fantastic, and the set design. I was really into this movie. The pacing was great.
Nice.
Highly recommend it. Yeah, it's about a woman who they don't really get into too much of her background, except that she's like a bodyguard, and she has like special skills, kind of like a CIA Jason Bourne type of character. And she's avenging her friend's death, who's been sucked into kind of like this, I guess like a human trafficking sort of ring. And yeah, I don't want to spoil too much about it, but I think it's on top 10 most watched movies in America for the week so far. So
really?
Yeah.
On Netflix.
On Netflix,
yeah.
Yeah, it's a really fun one. Really kinetic action, really stylized. It's almost like you're watching a music video more than a movie, but it's really well done. The color palette in each one of the scenes, it's like something like watching like a Tarantino movie. Like it's really well planned. The shots are extremely well framed.
Yeah, I'll put that on my list for sure. That sounds amazing.
It's the same director of another movie that was really great called The Call, which I also recommend. A horror movie.
When was that?
The Call's from maybe 2018, 2019. But I didn't know before I saw this one. I looked up the director and I was like, oh, that's a great movie too. So yeah, I think there are going to be some really great movies coming from this guy. And whose name I forgot, of course.
I think I can give it a googs. The Call, 2013, a veteran 911 operator?
No,
is that the one?
No, that's another one that's supposed to be really good. I think that's a movie that was remade by Jake Gyllenhaal recently. Is that Norwegian one or Danish one?
The Call, 2020 South Korean film, directed by Lee Chung-hyun.
Yeah, you should check that one out as well. It's really good.
The Ballerina and The Call, two excellent recommendations. I'm excited to try them.
Let me know what you think. It's just, not often recently that I've seen any movies that are that well done and stylistically so visually appealing with both camera movement but also set design. And this one has both.
Was it a dub or a...
I watched a dub, but you can watch it subtitled if you want. And the dubbing is always really good on Netflix, which I'm always really pleasantly surprised about because they get really good actors.
Yeah, the dub on our film today, Paradise, was also very good. I was a little surprised.
Yeah, it was great. How about you?
So I had a sketch idea. Just as a side note, in the back of my head, I've always thought it'd be really fun to create like a series of sketches and just put them on YouTube. No real structure to the show, not trying to recreate something like Kids in the Hall, but just every now and then writing some sketches, maybe putting them together in one video or just releasing them as they occur to you. But I thought it'd be fun if a guy goes to a personal trainer, like a fitness trainer, and it turns out to be the puppet from Saw. So he like gets into some elaborate, those like Nautilus machines with all the padding and the arms and stuff. They're on levers and things like that, except this one really kind of encloses you when you get into it. And he gets in and it kind of locks when he's in there. And he's like, oh, I don't know about this. But his face and his arms are up against pads. And then there's like a, gym TV And the puppet from Saw is in there and starts explaining to him that he's either going to work his lower abs the whole time, or if he releases his lower abs, it's going to stretch his hip flexors to the full range of a healthy person. And he's like, no. And he's like forced to work his lower abs. I think that would be a very effective training tool.
That's really funny. Did you ever see that sketch Working with Jigsaw?
No, what is that?
It's along the lines of what you're talking about. It's as if that puppet from Saw was your coworker. It's really funny.
I'll have to check that out. Is that on YouTube?
It's on YouTube, yeah.
Excellent. So somebody had pretty much the same idea I did and beat me to it.
Mm-hmm. By a few years, but this is pretty funny.
It's an obvious one.
Yeah. I like your idea a lot, though. The Jigsaw personal trainer.
Listen, it would be a workout for sure.
It really would be. Yeah. You're really incentivized to complete your workout for sure.
What?
Puts you in a trap at the end. Every workout.
He doesn't have to threaten you with death or injury, just, natural body movements, because they're so painful for the average person. Like if you actually stand up straight, and you have to stand up straight for more than like 2 seconds, it's painful. People start sweating, right? So all he has to do is create movements and machines that counterbalance your inflexibility with building core muscle strength.
I like it.
Maybe I'll make it an app instead.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, did you watch anything?
I've been listening to the audiobooks for the Expeditionary Force series. I'm on, I believe, book 10, and I just love it. It's just, I don't know how the author does it. It's not super complicated stuff, but he does such a good job keeping it engaging. I thought by book 10, he'd be losing me as an audience member, but actually I feel like he hit a point where he got a little bit better.
That's great. You on triple speed when you listen to it?
I'm at Steve -10, which we call normal speed.
It's like, oh, I missed that chapter. Wait a minute. I was on chapter 2 3 minutes ago. Now I'm chapter 10. What happened?
Your weird metric system that you use for listening to things.
Right.
No, yeah, I really enjoy the performance like we were talking about. I still am a proponent of that theory. The only reason you didn't like it is because the guy is acting his heart out, and he's such a talented voice actor that I think at fast speeds it's probably really annoying.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
That's my theory.
I just think it's funny to listen to it like that and then annoy you when I don't finish the book.
Ooh,
gotcha.
Steve. All right, so our project this week is Paradise, the 2023 German language film that is dubbed, and I guess you could probably turn on the subtitles as well, or instead. I think Netflix makes that an option now. Is
it
that
does,
standard?
yeah. And there's a lot of different languages you can switch to.
So I listened to it dubbed, and I think you did the same, and we both thought that was pretty well done, good acting. This was directed by Boris Kuntz, starring Kostya Ullman, maybe? Is that his name?
Yeah,
like that?
I think so. We're good with these pronunciations. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I'm killing the pronunciations. Yeah. Premise of this one, as I would put it, is unexplained equipment lets people sell years of their lives to others, and a man goes on a mission to get his wife's years back. Anything you would add?
I think that's a good summary. It's really the moral quandary, right? Would you sell years of your life in exchange for cash? Who has the right to do it? But it's a pretty timely topic, I would say.
Don't we already do that, though?
In a way, yeah, we do. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, right?
I mean, but even so, people who are farming, I don't know. Isn't that just kind of being human? Like, you can't really do what you want all the time. That's sort of the point of this film.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Except you don't sell those years all at once.
Well, you're giving up nights and weekends in exchange for getting it over with right away.
What's the difference?
Right? Isn't that
What's the difference,
basically
right?
it?
Pretty much.
Right. And if you couldn't earn that much anyway, you're not exactly giving up nights and weekends. It's more like if you could work harder and smarter and earn more money and you get it right away. I don't know. I mean, I think they present it as this terrible thing and basically taking advantage of the average person. But again, how is that different?
I was going to say
radically different.
Yeah, what's the difference between that and modern society? That's maybe the bigger question.
I mean, They're fewer than you would think. But all right, I think I'm getting ahead of us. I've already brought in the negativity that we usually save for a little bit later in the show.
You mean like in about 3 minutes?
3 minutes, yeah, usually. So people don't have to skip ahead for the cherished negativity in this one.
We bring it to you.
What made you pick this film?
It kept popping up on my Netflix queue, like a lot of other films. No, I watched the trailer. I just thought the concept was really fascinating. I just wanted to see really how they handle this dystopic future. And I'm always curious in these types of movies, like how much of the technology and the science are they going to go into? Or are they going to gloss over it like they did in this movie, which was basically, completely. Oh, we can do this. Okay, great.
It involves a chair and some hoses, but otherwise
that's about it. Yeah, you don't really need to know much more than that. I thought the concept of selling gears all at once was a really interesting one. Like, what is your life worth? Why are billionaires taking advantage of this across the globe? But they'd really gloss over all the things that I really wanted to watch this. I really wanted to watch it for those specific reasons. Yeah. But I didn't really get any clear answers, and you got more of a road movie at points and a little bit of a thriller. Even though I did enjoy it, if you don't look too deeply into it, it's an entertaining movie. I think it's well acted. I think the set design was good. I think they did quite a bit with the budget that they had. So this wasn't like a high budget movie. It was more like a concept movie. It reminded me a little bit of Aniara in that respect.
Yeah. I mean, if Aniara had a kick-ass action scene inserted at the end of the film,
right?
Then yeah. It'd be very similar.
There's certain flaws with it, obviously, like I just mentioned, that I really couldn't move past, Though I did find the relationship between the two leads to be really well done. Like her rapid aging.
Max and Elena. Yeah, Max and Elena. Yeah.
I wrote this one down. So this film is set in the near future where a groundbreaking technology allows the transfer of years of life from one person to another. The plot revolves around a man whose wife is forced to give up 40 years of her life as payment for an insurance debt. Desperate, the man embarks on a quest to find a way to reclaim those lost years. And that's it without revealing any spoilers, which we will during our podcast.
Yeah, that was the shortest of all Steve summaries.
Because I don't want to ruin it for the audience,
Yeah, I can tell. Okay, then I guess we should say for once, do we recommend that they go watch it, maybe stop the episode, go watch the movie, or are they better off just listening to us talk about it a little bit and then, probably not watching it?
I'm kind of conflicted by this one. I would say I think it's worth a watch. I don't think it's worth a second watch. You?
100% just listen to this episode. Normally I tell people just stop the episode, throw your phone in the ocean, never come back. But in this particular case, I would say really the trailer has a lot of promise. I think there's some interesting ideas that it presents, but it really doesn't develop that stuff very much. I think it's probably more interesting to just listen to people break down certain aspects and think about what you would think about that. And then if you go try to watch it, I think you'll very quickly see that this is a movie you might want to watch while you're like doing dishes or something.
Fair enough. Whether you watch it or don't watch it, make sure you listen to this episode at some point. I think that's our bigger point. And subscribe, by the way.
Yeah, or don't, whatever. Anyway, great summary. Anything in particular you wanted to talk about in this one?
I want to talk a little bit about the motivation for our villain, the head of Aeon. This idea that we've got a villain that's very much like a James Bond style villain who wants to live forever and will do anything to do that. It would have been great. I know I say this in other episodes, but I think it's really lacking in a lot of these types of movies, these sci-fi movies, is a backstory that's really compelling for that main character.
Yeah. No, they definitely needed that.
Because otherwise you've got this cookie cutter character. She's just evil and wants to live forever. And our protagonists, it was very interesting the way that they really developed their relationship from when they're this idealistic couple all the way through to her making the mistake about giving up the years of her life. And then through her development into old age and what that does to their relationship in general. I thought that was really well done, but it created this imbalance in the plot or the arc of the story overall.
No, you're absolutely right. It was so heavily weighted on one side. And we really would have benefited from a rich backstory, like an exploration or more scenes with our villain talking about why she invented this technology, which we find out really at the end, more or less. Like that would have been interesting to weave that in sooner, to give her the appearance of a noble cause, but in reality, she's more of a James Bond villain who's trying to live forever and frustrated that she can't get her hands on the life years that she wants and what she's willing to do to get that. Yeah, that would have been much, much better. Absolutely. And it wouldn't have taken a lot of time, just a few key sines.
Yeah, and I think if they would have developed that character as having lost a lot of her youth for some reason or traumatic event, right?
Or like she sacrificed it for her work, right? To develop this technology would have been great. Or if she had a genetic disorder or, trying to take care of her children, she felt like she sacrificed key years, anything like that.
Yeah. Anything that would have kind of explained the idea that she wants to get these years back, because otherwise you've just got someone who seems to have been extremely successful, incredibly wealthy, lived a full life, or is living a full life, who just wants to extend more of that. And that's basically the motivator, which I think falls pretty flat.
Yeah, she had presumably many years ahead of her, many healthy years. Yeah, and it really does fit with the existing story so easily. All they have to say is, she feels like she gave up important years developing her career and her technology to her daughter with progeria, who passed away. And it looked like passed away. I couldn't tell how old, by the nature of the disease, and they didn't really show us much. But I think the gravestone might have had the years on it, but I'm assuming at least 10, 15 years. And if you add the other daughter to that, then it really wouldn't be hard for this villain to try to make a case that she's just trying to get years back that she lost through no fault of her own, as self-centered and short-sighted as that is, or I guess unempathetic. So yeah, that would have been really interesting in a kind of complicated, delusional villain way. So yeah, I love that. Right off the bat, you come in with good stuff.
And also the rebel group. They were really just thrown in there as kind of, just
tacked on for sure.
Tacked on because you need a group that's against all of this, right? If you didn't know really anything about any of them, really their motivation for it. It reminds you of that Black Mirror episode with the rebel group that kills the astronaut or the astronaut's family, right? They just show up.
Favorite episode, yeah.
They just show up and do it. No backstory, no explanation. They're bad.
Because they're hippies.
Yeah, they're bad hippies.
Hippies are evil. I don't know if you knew that.
Same deal here, right? It's almost like they took a concept that can be so fascinating on so many levels, and they Frankensteined it with some really good acting and some really poignant moments. But other than that, you didn't really get a really full, rich sci-fi movie. Like you didn't really get Blade Runner.
Definitely not. Yeah. Well, they put a lot of pressure on the actor who played Max and Elena, the actress who played Elena, to provide a lot of nuance to the characters and to make them really make the story work, prevent it from feeling flat and boring. But I think right off the bat, right there, your suggestion would have enriched this movie significantly, maybe even bumped it up a star. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time. You're not adding a lot of scenes, just a few key scenes to, make that character a little bit more rich. And honestly, I can think of some scenes you could cut. There were some characters they tried to develop a little bit, and that didn't really work and didn't add anything. So you can shorten those scenes just a bit, and it already makes it better. So yeah, excellent. I love that.
What do you think about the way they handle the technology? I know we kind of alluded to that earlier.
Oh man,
but what would you have changed?
All of it.
All right. Next question. No.
No. It's a great question. It's just they didn't, did they? They didn't talk about the technology at all. As far as I'm concerned, this is a fantasy film because there's absolutely no science in it, and there's nothing about it that says that it would even be remotely possible. They don't attempt to explain it. They throw up a couple buzzwords like DNA. And that's about it. Like they don't even do like fancy up-to-date buzzwords. They use like classic buzzwords from like middle school, not even middle school, like 6th grade science, like 5th grade science. And that's it, and it's so hand wavy. It's ridiculous. It may as well just be like a wizard is casting a spell as far as I'm concerned. So that irritated me the whole time.
Wouldn't it have been great if they would have done something along the lines of The Last of Us? How they explained the fungus,
yes.
something similar to explain this technology and the evolution of the technology, because it's so timely, right? Like maybe it started out this what would you call that? I guess it's synthetic biology. I guess the development of that and how it started accelerating, and maybe how it was being used in all different kind of rogue ways, and this Aeon group wanted to kind of formally put a leash on it. That would have been an interesting kind of plot.
Well, there's a lot of research into aging, and it's not that hard to talk about oxidation or telomeres or any of the other relevant terms, and at least try to pitch some sort of pathway from where we are to where this is. Try to explain what is happening, why there's a delayed reaction for those of you who I assume aren't going to watch this. Once somebody goes through the treatment to sacrifice their years, there's a delay. It takes, I guess, 24, 48 hours, something like that, maybe 3 days for them to actually reach the age that they agreed to. And they go through a pretty uncomfortable process to do that. And I would assume the other way is true. So something is being extracted. Perhaps it's going into cells. Perhaps it's being inserted in DNA. Maybe something is cleaning out damage. I have no idea, but they didn't even hint at, it was almost like a slap in the face. It was really, as far as I'm concerned, it could have been some sort of clover, some 5-leafed clover that you had to put in your pocket, or, some sort of aliens from the future dropped this thing off. Like it just didn't, it was very frustrating.
Do you think this as a limited series would have worked? Or do you think you just would have gotten more of the same?
I don't think without your idea and a bunch of other similar ideas that it would work as a limited series. I think the person who told this story, whether that's primarily the writers or the director, what they wanted to do was talk about the relationship between Max and Elena. And so that's really all they did, right? They wanted to make some points about how two people and how, what love is, what relationships are, what that means, what people are willing to sacrifice, the lengths that certain people might go to. That stuff to me felt a little cliche. None of it was like really groundbreaking. And I think that's all they wanted to do. They threw in one really long action sequence. They tried to add some twists and give it traditional plot structure, but that's it. I don't think they wanted to talk about science. They just wanted to use the trappings of science. And I think that's sloppy.
Do you think it's a movie about really the change in a relationship? How they had such a limited window between when she's young and when she's old, and kind of like how she's able to see the relationship in a completely different light when she's older and is like faced with the consequence that she may not have that many years to realize that she shouldn't be in this relationship in the first place and it's not what she actually wanted.
Yeah, that's an interesting read. I think the read I had more was this experience revealed problems in their relationship a lot more than the problems were the result of what happened to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think either one could work because they didn't really explain it.
There's a lot of guessing going on, audience, from your...
and for key points, yeah.
From your host right now. Yeah, because there's really not much to hold on to. And then some of the elements that they threw in there with the villain, and I'm going back to her again because that's the character that I think is just so poorly drawn, is how she's willing to sacrifice her own daughter just to make her extra evil.
Yeah. I think the end, it was almost like a post-credit scene a little bit, the way it was like a post-log or epilogue. But I think that was meant to, actually, I don't know. Listening to you, it seems like you had a different experience. But for me, I thought that revealed the truth of each character all along. So for those of you who haven't seen it, right, the characters go on this adventure where it turns out that the villain was manipulating this young couple all along, that her original intention was to get years of life from the woman. And this guy, Max, who's a salesman for her company, who goes and like tricks people or talks people into, selling years of their life. He fell in love with this woman. He was supposed to get her years. They got married. Our villain who owns the company never forgot about that and eventually figured a way to force the woman via like a contract she signed to give up, was it 38
years?
38 years of her life, which of course is devastating to a young couple and a young woman. And then the husband, Max, the salesman, goes on just sort of a man on fire quest to set this right. And then at the end, all the characters sort of end up in a specific place, which I thought revealed who they really are. And it sounds like you thought was partially at least the product of their experiences, like them changing.
I think you could read it either way. I don't think there is a right answer on this one because they don't really like delve into it as much as you would want. But I thought they really were a product of what they had experienced, but they had a tendency to move in that direction. It was kind of like a nature-nurture situation, you know? They kind of had the propensity for acting in that way, but this extreme situation really brought that out. Yeah.
I mean, I think I agree with that. What I don't like about it is where people landed was a little bit cliche, and it was a little bit, it plays into that misogynistic narrative where, you know, women, I don't know, they don't care about you as much as men care about them, or they don't sacrifice as much. It sort of played into that. It wasn't like the movie, it seemed like it was trying to make the point about all women, but because it was so centrally focused on this couple and really telling their story, I thought that was, I don't know, not optimal.
What did you think of him going to join the rebels at the end?
So let's talk about the wrap up. All right, because we keep circling it, we may as well talk about the end. So as I said at the end, we see the status of all the characters. All right. So the doctor, the one who was the villain, essentially, she gets to keep her youth. And that's what she wanted. The wife, Elena, gets her youth back, and she gets the baby she wanted. So she's happy. The main character, Max, he gets out of a bad marriage. And instead of taking people's lives in a roundabout way by conning them, he gets to do it directly with bullets. So I felt like the end was a win for everyone. The only person who got screwed was the daughter. So the villain has a daughter, and she has her years taken for Elena. Basically, Elena drags her to this like black market life-taking facility or whatever you want to call it, van. The daughter of the villain ends up sacrificing 38 years of her life to Elena, Max's wife. And so I feel like everybody won. Everybody got what they wanted except that girl. She got screwed.
That girl was the innocent bystander in all of it.
Yeah. But everybody else, basically, it's a win for all of them. Convince me I'm wrong.
I really can't. And they left it open for a sequel.
Oh, right? Okay.
The villain just kind of out there doing her villain things because she wore a bulletproof vest or something.
Yep.
So she survived.
She's fine. She got her years. She's totally fine. She obviously doesn't care about her daughter. The villain won.
Yep. The end. No, it
is the end.
And what did you think of that bodyguard character?
She just quit. So for those of you, again, who probably aren't going to watch this, the villain has a bodyguard, like a security chief, who's been with her for a long time. We find out during the story that this woman, who appears to be, 30s, I guess, is actually in her 60s and also got 30 years given to her, whatever it is. So at the end, she's sort of sickened by all these bad things that happen, all these people who are victimized, and she quits. And she walks away with her youth. And she presumably has money and just goes off to do whatever she wants to do. Like the villain doesn't have her killed or anything. So it's fine. She's fine. She worked for this person. Maybe she feels a little guilty about it. She's got some money. She got 30 something years of her life added back. Like she's fine. That's a win for her too. What did you think?
I thought it was kind of ridiculous that she suddenly came to this conclusion after God knows how many years of working for her. Like, oh, this is maybe not morally correct, and maybe my boss is evil, and like she just has this epiphany.
Okay. Counterpoint, it's the perfect time because she's apparently at retirement age.
Touche. You got me.
So, you could say...
She was just waiting for the pension to kick in?
Yeah. She's just retiring. She's 60. She said she's 65 or something like that. She's just retiring.
I'm sick of this shit.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. I'm sick of this stuff. Sorry. I don't want to get demonetized before we get monetized.
Yeah, I want to move to Florida. Like she's ready to retire. She's at the age, and she said, I'm doing this for moral reasons, and dropped the mic and walked out. But really, she's just been working for 5 decades or whatever it is. So she's ready to retire.
She walked into another dystopian German series that'll be on Netflix next year.
Yeah.
What are you guys shooting?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they tried to make it seem like this was a semi-tragic ending. And I agree only in the sense that the little girl got screwed. But the main character, Max, he was not a good person. He did what he did for his own reasons. And at the end, I think he very definitively proved that he does not care about other people. He just changed his sides, basically, and he stopped stealing lives to give to other people, and he started stealing them to make a point, I guess, or to get revenge on the world or whatever his problem is. And honestly, it is growth for him to be more directly aggressive and more honest about it, as opposed to what he was doing before, where he was trying to convince himself that he was somehow helping people by tricking them. So it's, I guess, better for him to use bullets and grenades.
Yeah, and the wife clearly got what she wanted.
Yep.
So
she just moved on to the next man, got the baby she wanted, kept her youth, and now she's with Surfer Dude.
Perfect.
Everybody
Perfect
won.
Perfect ending.
Everybody won. Just the one idealistic daughter got screwed. That's it. So what's the message there, right? I'm struggling to find it.
It's tough. It's a high concept, very little message. Kind of cookie cutter.
I mean,
right?
I think the concept is deceptively middle. It's not really it's not particularly sophisticated. I think they dressed it up a lot. Well, okay, let's talk about, other than your idea of adding some real depth and development to the villain. Can you think of anything else that might have made this a lot better?
Diving into the technology, I think, would have added a really great context to everything else that happens in the movie that you just don't get. And I mentioned The Last of Us before, and how kind of like the history of the spread of the fungus really set the perfect stage for where the characters end up. And without that, you would have just had characters just roaming across a vast wasteland, I think, without having that grounding.
I think they also missed a ton of fun playing around with the audience not knowing characters' ages and swapping out younger and older actors for the same characters. It's a little bit more like, I can't think of a good movie that does this, but where you don't realize it's the same character, but they're younger, so they're played by another actor. Or the character you're watching, you don't realize is actually much, much older than you think, or much, much younger than you think. And that two characters who maybe develop a relationship are completely mismatched in age, and then having them come back later and be different. And like, I think they could have done so many fun things with that.
Like those body swap teen comedies?
Sure,
like
yeah.
17 Again, or Freaky Friday, right? Is that
sure?
One of them, or?
I mean, just as one piece, but like imagine, okay, so there's a part in the film where our main characters have kidnapped the daughter of the villain, and they're hiding out in this abandoned resort hotel. Imagine if during that they came across some kid, who was like, looked like they'd been living outside and were barely making it. And they take this kid in, and it turns out it's like the security person from earlier, or something like that. Like, I think that would be fun.
That would have been fun. Taking the movie in a whole different direction.
Yeah, you never know. Like, maybe the young girl they kidnapped is saying she's the daughter of the villain, but it's actually her mother. That could be true too. Because that completely flips the narrative, how you feel as an audience member. Like when you realize, oh man, they're victimizing this poor innocent young girl, you feel bad and you're sort of torn about what you want to happen next. But then imagine if you find out again later that no, actually this woman's like 112 and she's been getting treatments and now she looks like she's like 15 or whatever. And you're like, what the, they could have done that so many times. And
like an after credits scene.
Exactly. Just flip the whole movie.
Where the villain's like, don't worry about it, honey. You're going to be 68 now. Remember, you started at 112, so you're doing much better.
You're still 50 years ahead or whatever. Yeah. So I think they missed a lot.
Couldn't she just, wait a minute, couldn't she just do this process again and become young again? They never really explained that.
Yeah.
Like she gave up 38 years. Could you reverse it again and just continue?
So I think the point they were trying to make about that was apparently for whatever magical, dumb, plot convenient reasons, the main character and her family are only compatible, or sorry, the villain and her family are only compatible with a small number of people on the planet. And so really the best thing would be for the villain to give the years she stole from Elena back to her daughter, which I guess is healthy and reasonable. So then her daughter could be her normal age, right? And then the villain would presumably go back to trying to find somebody else who's a match. But I think they were trying to say that because it took the villain this long to find a match, and she was trying to play by the rules and do things legally, she had to or mostly, at least appear to be, she had to do it in this roundabout way. So she reasonably doesn't think she'll find anybody, so she's not going to give up her youth while she looks.
And I kept thinking about the technology behind how this would actually work, or why you'd need someone else in order to do this. Are you swapping out DNA within yourself for younger DNA, and it's perfectly aligning with your DNA? It was so bizarre when I really started thinking about it that I just kind of put it aside. I was like, I can't think about this. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That you're grabbing someone else's DNA who's a quote unquote match, like a blood transfusion.
Right.
But somehow that younger DNA is somehow giving you younger DNA, but DNA is matched to the person who it's coded for. So how would that even work?
That's the problem. There's too many ways that, and honestly, you could say it's impossible. You could say, well, maybe there's a scientific way that it could work, but we're not given any of that information. So as far as I'm concerned, it's fantasy. It's a fantasy film. May as well be a magic wand. You go lick a toad and it turns you into a younger person. And that's honestly something this movie had me thinking about, which is the difference between science fiction and fantasy.
No, I was just thinking about the technology part. The fact that you say it's fantasy is really the only way it could work. Because right. I was just thinking to myself, I know I said earlier about explanation of the technology, but I was just trying to think, what would the explanation be that would remotely make any sense without just using a bunch of big scientific words and just throwing them all together and then having you kind of move along in terms of the plot. So maybe that's why they didn't even try it. They're like, this is so far-fetched in so many ways that we can't even ground this in any type of science fiction, let alone science.
They didn't even try. It was very, very disappointing and very distracting. And I hate that people online, the descriptions are all science fiction, because it's not science fiction. I think a lot of people distinguish fantasy and science fiction based on the idea that if it's possible, then, it's speculative fiction and what happens in there is possible, then they call it science fiction. And if it's impossible, they call it fantasy. But a lot of projects are a mix, right? Some aspects of it are possible. They give theories or reasons why this is developed or could happen. And then other aspects of it are just sort of, it just happened, it can, whatever. So I think it's a very blurry line, but this I definitely think falls squarely in the realm of fantasy 100%, just because it involves things that look like technology. It's more Star Wars, right? Star Wars is mostly fantasy. There's a little bit you can go buy the thick technical manuals that explain how the engines work and all that kind of stuff. But if you just watch the movie, the original movie, it's just fantasy, right? It's got some lasers and tech in it, but it's fantasy. This to me is just fantasy. There's no science fiction, which is fine, but it's just mislabeled a lot.
I would agree with you. Yeah. How would you change the movie? I know I'm jumping ahead, but would you change the movie? I know you're going to say yes, of course, but would you turn this into, I don't know, a limited series like we've talked about in the past? Could you turn it into a series? Or do you think it's so flawed from the get-go that you'd have to change so much about it that it's not even possible to turn this into something else in terms of the IP?
Yeah, I think you're asking my favorite question. What would you do with this IP? And I think if it landed in my lap and I owned it, I would do a sequel or a series, follow a sequel series, a story. I would continue the story. I would get new characters. I would take my time and try to tell, now that they've sort of established a lot of things, I would try to tell a little bit more of an involved story with different groups of characters who have different purposes, different end goals. I think I would weave them together in and out in sort of clever ways. Like, you realize later that someone has been using the technology to appear as a child or a 20-year-old in one group. It's actually the same character in the other group. You didn't realize that. This technology, it just takes 3 days or something. And apparently you can go back and forth with no consequences. So I would have a lot of fun with that, where characters are popping up in different places and you realize later in the series or the film, it's actually the same character and they've been manipulating people. Maybe they have a fake tattoo that they put on and take off or something, so they seem different, but at very different ages. So I would do a lot of that stuff. I would absolutely weave in a lot of the science. I would have a character or group of characters be looking at the science of this, and that leading to new, maybe even kind of fun, crazy developments where you not only change your age, but you can change other things about yourself. It adds to the confusion of the story and the cultural impact of the developments. And then I would ultimately end with this technology imploding upon itself, where the final evolution of it basically renders it something that everybody realizes you should never do, or kills people who use it or something like that, so that it, sort of eliminates itself.
I like that. Yeah. I like the way you're talking about weaving all the different characters in and out of the story, because I think that adds that kind of the well-rounded aspect that I was talking about that this movie is missing.
Yeah.
And something just occurred to me just now. I was wondering if this would work as a thriller where it's actually the race to find the person who, let's say, donated blood or donated DNA in the future, and how all these maybe governments are after it in order to find that technology. Of course, it gives you a completely different movie, but
that's needed.
There's
here.
just exactly there's one person, right? That's a donor for this life extension.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a substance or something that they discover. They're like, wait a minute, this person doesn't seem to age, and why is that? And they discover what that is, but it's been anonymized somewhere in a lab when they give these donations, and it's a numbered sample.
Gotcha.
So it's the race to get that sample in order to have that power.
Right. And everyone's highly motivated to get it. And they're willing to play these games and trick people and manipulate each other and sacrifice people to get there. So they can do things like change their age 5 or 10 times in a month, just go back and forth. I mean, you and I would assume, I think, as an audience member, that would be a very draining, very painful process, that you could not go back and forth repeatedly. But there's nothing in the movie that suggests that that's the case. So you can just devolve into total chaos as far as I'm concerned.
You know what happened with this movie? I think that they were so interested in kind of the visual look of the movie and kind of not having so much exposition, because typically exposition in movies, too much of it is bad. But in this case, they went the other direction, where just a little more exposition or a little side conversation could have explained so much more about what was going on, or character motivation, that it would have really helped for them not to skip over it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So a series that plays around with some of these fun elements in creative ways and also adds back in that missing exposition, I think would be great. I mean, the other option would be to take this story, strip away a lot of what they added so that it's a very short film and it really is just about Max and Elena, instead of pretending like it's a full-length story. I think you could just make it a short film and end it in the same place, start it in the same place, and just, we don't need a 7-minute fight sequence or whatever that was, and the long car rides and stuff like that. Just cut all that out.
I think it's a short film. I think it would work. It would actually work.
Much better. Yeah.
Right? Because you could really focus in on Max and Elena.
Yep.
And even the Sophie character.
Yep.
And kind of the conflict there.
Yep.
With one arc and a resolution.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Without throwing everybody else in there, causing chaos, and then confusing the audience or having the audience ask so many questions. You would just accept it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a short
film.
The technology. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in this world that exists, moving on. Okay. Yeah, for sure. I think you got it. This should have been a short movie.
Yep. And it can be if you fast forward through it, or you watch it at triple speed.
Steve,
just
speed.
A little, just a little pro tip there.
Oh, the Fast and the Furious. You just go through angry. really quick. All right, great. Any questions for the audience to answer on this one?
The same question we leave them with every time. What would you do with the IP?
Oh, yeah.
I think the other thing is, how would you resolve this technology question if you had to have it in the movie? What would you do, and how would you explain it? If you were going to make it based on science, what would be the explanation that could make this possible?
Yeah. Yeah, or you could just rip off the Dark Crystal. I think they did the same thing in there.
Classic. I haven't watched that in a long time.
I'd also like to hear what people think personally, the differences between science fiction and fantasy. Do they believe that those are distinct genres, that they bleed into each other and a story can kind of go back and forth from one to the other? What the characteristics are of one that separate it from the other? Actually, I think it's really an ongoing question. I don't think there is really a definitive answer. Now, I'm sure a lot of people feel like they know. And if that's you, send me a message, Google us, drop us a note and let us know. And maybe I'll read it in future episodes, because I think about that a lot and I have not found a really definitive answer that I think works consistently. Great. All right. Thank you to the people who made the project we reviewed. Thank you to you listeners. I appreciate you sticking through to the end. Stay away from those like and subscribe buttons unless you listen to my co-host. We will see you next week for Dead Heat, right? Is that the plan?
Yep. Dead Heat for sure next week.
See you next week.
Take care, everybody.